great to have you here with us. I'm your host, Caitlin Cormier, and I want to kick things off with a statistic that might surprise you. 90% of Canadian women will need to manage their own finances at some point in their life, according to a study by IPC Private Wealth in 2019. It could be due to divorce or widowhood or simply choosing to remain single. That might seem daunting to some women who may be more than happy to pass that responsibility off to their partner or a family member, for example. But failing to be involved in financial planning can cause unexpected financial problems later in life, such as losing out on income supports or lower living standards in retirement. So, taking charge of your finances sooner than later might be a sound idea. Well, we're going to explore some of those first steps to helping women do just that. Joining us is Leslie McCormick, author of Bank on Yourself. Her book is all about why women should plan to manage their money and invest as if they were single. Leslie, thanks so much for taking the time to chat.
You're welcome, Caitlin. Thanks so much for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your professional experience and your involvement with financial planning?
So, I'm in my 20th year as an advisor. And over the course of my career, I've come to appreciate that when life changes, money changes. And when money changes, life changes. I felt compelled to write this book because it came from an experience too many times of meeting with women whose life had changed and unfortunately hadn't proactively asked the question, what if? What if I have to do this on my own my whole life? What if I find myself on my own again, whether that's the result of divorce, widowhood, or a partner's health decline? In your introduction, Caitlin, you said it, 90% of women will be responsible for their own finances at some point in life. So why aren't more of us planning that way?
It's so important that women know that statistic so that they can know that chances are they're probably going to be in that situation at some point in time. Okay, I'm excited to dive into our conversation, but first, a quick note to our audience. So, what we discuss is not intended to be financial advice that's broadly applicable to everyone. These are just considerations to help you figure out your own plan specific to your needs and goals. Consider speaking with a financial advisor if you feel that you need assistance. With that said, let's go ahead. Okay, first off, it can be easy for some women to ignore or delay financial planning, especially if they lack confidence in their financial knowledge. Why do you feel it's so important that they take an active role in money management as early as possible?
Unfortunately, Caitlin, the consequences of not actively planning are simply too great. According to Statistics Canada data, Canadian women outlive men by about 4 years. The 2016 census found that the fastest growing demographic in Canada are centenarians, and there are 5 women for every male. Baby boomer women can expect to outlive their spouses by 10 to 15 years. Average age a woman becomes a widow in Canada is 56. And about 1/3 of marriages end in divorce before their 30th anniversary. For a widow, the loss of government benefits, reduced pension, loss of the ability to income split results in an average decline in income of about 40%. 28% of single seniors live in poverty, with single senior women being 13 times more likely to live in poverty than those living in families. This is why every woman should plan financially to be single, even if she's not.
Interestingly, some research suggests that women tend to be better investors than men, yet they're also generally less confident. And why do you think that might be?
I've seen a lot of these surveys. The questions tend to vary, and the percentages of those women who express feelings of financial confidence, it varies. But there's one thing that stays the same. The gap between men and women and how they feel their level of financial confidence is. Now, maybe men are overstating their confidence, right? And maybe women are understating. But anecdotally, it seems that Unless women know everything there is to know, they just won't express feelings of confidence. And so they hesitate actually taking the first step. They perceive investing to be an all or nothing sort of thing. And so they become discouraged from even starting. And yet, I think it's really encouraging. Some research from Fidelity in the US, and they actually did a big survey and actually found that women outperform men in their investing portfolios when they choose to invest by about 0.4% per year. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but over a long period of time, it makes a significant difference. And so, why does that outperformance happen? I tend to think it's because, women tend to be planners and are really good about taking a long-term view. We have more patience. And so when we have a plan, we're likely to stick it out. And we tend to invest. We don't gamble. And so by investing, not gambling, I think we avoid some of the really big downsides in the portfolio.
I have to say, I really love that statistic, and I'm going to have to remember it to bring up at parties, just in general conversation about women having better performance than men in investing. I just have to make sure that I remember that one because that's definitely one of my favorites for sure so far in our conversation. So some women might be intimidated by learning how to manage their finances and investing. So what can they do to kind of help build their confidence around this?
It can seem overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be complicated. And I like to say it starts with a vision for your future. What are those relationships, interests, goals that bring you joy? What is it that your financial resources need to be there to support? Right? Having that vision and a plan to get you there, it actually can make investing less intimidating. I like to encourage women to talk about money. I know it's a taboo subject, but I would encourage you to find someone you can trust. Find, someone that you can ask questions of, and talk to older generations. Another tool that I've heard people use is creating a financial model. When you have a motto for what's relevant to you in your life, what your priorities are, it becomes a tool that you can run financial decisions past. Because so often we just get caught up in day to day and we just make decisions on the fly. But if you have something like a motto that you can run a decision past and say, does this help me or does this distract? It can help make financial decisions easier and help you avoid those ones that, a few years go by and say, why did I really buy that? Or why did I spend my money that way? I really didn't need to. And finally, celebrate the victories. This is a really long marathon that we're all running. And so, yeah, we want to be smart about tomorrow, but we've got to balance with enjoying some today too. So give yourself some short-term rewards.
In your book, you talk about the importance of creating an actual financial plan and an investment plan that details how you will save and live during retirement. So, what are some of the elements of a sound plan for someone to put together? So, in your experience, what are some of those kind of key elements?
Right. So, in my opinion, a sound financial plan, you might have heard the acronym when it comes to plans as being SMART, right? They need to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And there are a number of very specific details that might go into a financial plan. Some of them are about you, yourself, and your circumstances, and others are assumptions that kind of everyone needs to make. So, for yourself, at what age do you intend to retire? Right? At what point do you want to be working because you want to, not because you have to? How much do you spend? Right? What your lifestyle is, it's kind of your choice. No one else can tell you that. There are no, I don't like rules of thumb. This is about you. This is your plan. So, what does it take for you to be comfortable? The plan will kind of help guide towards how much in savings you will need to achieve that goal. how much you plan to save versus potentially how much you might need to save to reach the goal. Rates of return, I encourage conservative rates of return assumptions. Right? We would way rather accelerate a goal than have to delay a goal. And also, it helps allow for things like, well, what happens if there's major purchases or life events, and how that might impact your investment plan. So, a really good plan needs to be tracked. Review where you are relative to that plan at least once a year. Change it as your life changes. And really, really importantly, ask the question, what if? We all want to plan happy, healthy, active to at least 95. But what if?
I love how you say that it's not a one size fit all type of plan, that it's very specific to individuals. I feel like sometimes we can kind of feel these things are very regimented. So it's important to know that it's everyone is so unique. Everyone has different circumstances, and it is important to know that those plans can be very specific to those individuals, and yeah, not a one size fits all type of a situation. So that's great.
I've yet to see kind of like a real rule of thumb that actually applies broadly. And it's one of the most important things you can keep in mind. This is about you. This is about your circumstances. It's not about what your sister did, your friend did, your coworker did, your parents might have done. This is about you.
That being said, some women might feel as though they don't have enough of an understanding of their finances and their investing to adequately plan. So, what are some practical steps to consider when they're starting to build a personalized investment plan?
So there is one question that no one else can answer for you. And that question is how much you spend. That's always a great place to start. And when you're planning for the future, it's actually one of the hardest questions for people to answer when we're doing a financial plan is how much you spend. So I have a really simple starting place. And that is start with, well, how much comes into your bank account each month today? What comes in? That's an after-tax dollar. It's what you have available to spend, save. And then we fast forward to retirement and we say, well, what goes away? Ideally, when you retire, your mortgage is paid off. Kids are hopefully financially independent. You're no longer having to save for retirement, you're living your retirement. And then we look to say, what gets added in? How do you spend your time if you're not working? For some people, volunteering isn't really going to cost you a lot, but it's a great use of your time. Other people, will use the stereotypical golf and travel. Those can be pretty expensive items, right? Let's add those expenses in. And that's a good starting place to figure out, okay, how much am I going to spend?
And for those in our audience, there are many other ways to help make the most of an investing plan that we cannot cover here. So, for more ideas, consider watching our webinar, My Do's and Don'ts to Help an Investing Plan Soar. You can find it in the Learning Center on Webbroker and on TD's YouTube channel. Okay, so you mentioned that having a financial plan to be single doesn't mean excluding your partner from that plan. So, when it comes to investing, what are some ways to build a cohesive plan that balances partnered life with potential single life?
That's really important for me to express that for those who are in a committed relationship, recognize that this plan, it's not about planning apart from one another, but for each other. That if something happens to one of you, the survivor's going to be okay. So first of all, I encourage you to, in the division of household labor, you know, it should never allow for one partner to completely abdicate financial responsibility. You're both in this, and the direction that you take, you need to both be on board with and a part of. It doesn't mean that both of you have to be involved in the nitty-gritty decisions, but that big picture, that financial plan, that direction of where we're going, both of you really need to be involved in that conversation. And at an absolute minimum, at least once a year, checking in to see where you're at. Are you on track or not? It's important to recognize that you may have different goals and objectives, and that's okay, right? A plan can accommodate for both. But when it comes to risk tolerance, we need to be respectful of each other's risk tolerance. So one person may invest one way and the other person may invest another way. I encourage you to know where the household assets and liabilities are. You may have a work plan that only you have visibility on, or your partner might, right? Make sure that each other knows about what those benefits are and what those assets are, and who the contact person is for all of the assets and liabilities, just in case there's a problem.
Yeah, and it's not fun to talk about that kind of stuff or to plan for that stuff, but so vital, right? Making sure that you're covered for yourself as well as that your partner's covered if something happens to either one of you, right? We're in it together and then all of a sudden it's one. So it is very important to consider those things and plan for them for sure. We've talked a lot about the importance of having a retirement plan and sticking to it. So, with that in mind, I want to take a moment to hop into Webroker to show our audience a tool that can help them hammer out the dollars and cents along the way. All right, so today we're going to look at the goals tool. So, what we're going to do is we're going to click on this fourth option here along the top that says goals. So, this is our homepage where we can start any type of goal that we'd like. We're able to track it and go in and see progress. So, it's a really great tool to help you make sure that you're on track for your investing goals. So, let's get started and create a new goal today. So today, let's go ahead and use retirement as our purpose. So let's just say that we're 30 years old. Let's say that we're currently earning 60,000 a year before tax, and we'd like to retire at age 65. Compared to our current income, how much income do we need in retirement? So we have a choice here. Let's go ahead with 80% for today. Let's assume that maybe we're going to have a little bit more income coming up in our future years within our career. So we want a pretty good amount of our current income in retirement. Of course, we can do a separate calculation, but we'll use that for today. And let's call our retirement, our goal retirement. We'll be very original today. Okay, that's the basics. Next up, we have to decide what type of investor we are. So there is an example of three different types of investors here that we can choose from. At the top, there's also a quick video you can see. One thing I like to do to help give some perspective is to compare and then just go ahead and put conservative, moderate, and aggressive side by side. Take some time to kind of look through, see the differences between them, really try and understand yourself and see what you're comfortable with. Make sure you're comfortable with the worst possible return because, of course, the best return looks always wonderful, but the worst return is the one we certainly need to be comfortable with. Go ahead and make your decision. For today, I'm just going to choose the middle of the row there. We'll choose moderate. We can also go in to see full details to see exactly what a moderate portfolio would look like, get some more in-depth information. For now, we're just going to click to choose that and move forward. Next up, we're going to say what money we're using today for this savings. So let's just go ahead and assume that we're using the account we have today. And let's assume that we've already saved a little bit of money. So let's say we have $20,000 already saved towards this particular goal. And also, I'm going to go ahead and make ongoing contributions. So let's just say I'm putting $200 biweekly into this savings. So we have $20,000 already plus $200 biweekly. So save and continue. And this is going to show us what our outcome is. So plan summary, our goal is to have 1.1 million for retirement base. Now we're going to have 727,000. So we can see sort of an overview of our goals here, our retirement age, our contribution amount, contribution frequency. We can make small changes here to see what difference that might be. But another great place to click is right here to view assumptions. So this is showing us what assumptions are used to do this calculation, telling us that we're using both CPP and old age security here in this calculation. We can also input things like other sources of income. So always want to potentially have multiple sources of income. Maybe we have a pension that we're going to receive money for, or maybe we have rental properties. There could be lots of different ways for us to receive income outside of just our retirement savings. So if there is anything to consider in this situation, you can go ahead and put it in. So I'm just going to put, let's just say that we're going to earn $10,000 per year in other income, and I'm going to click save. So that's going to go ahead and readjust. So now I see my goal is only 795,000 as opposed to 1.1 million. And my projection is to have 730. So we're a lot closer. I can make just sort of some small adjustments here. So let's just say do 225 biweekly, recalculate. And there we go. I'm over my projection there just by including that. So really great tool to use. We can click to start the plan and we'll see within our dashboard. So this is telling us what we can do. Going to our dashboard, this shows us we are good with this goal, our target, our projection. Of course, our portfolio value will continually increase over time as our investments grow. And we can always come back and keep track of this goal. So this is a way to really put your goal into words. So actually see what it is that you need to save, make some adjustments, and keep track of it along the way to make sure that you're doing everything you can to ensure a successful investment plan. All right, hopefully that demo helps our viewers get a jump start on their retirement planning. Government benefits are a key source of income for retirees. How might they differ or change for a woman who's single rather than married?
It's important to recognize that your government benefits are yours. They are based on you as an individual. In a household, we might have two sets, but they're based on two individuals. So, with CPP and how much you as an individual might receive as CPP, really comes down to a couple of important things: how many years you've been contributing for, and how much your earnings have been, which dictates how much you've contributed each year. Old age security, it really comes down to the number of years you've been resident in Canada after the age of 18. Your entitlement is yours. Old age security, so that OAS, know that it's income tested. So above certain level of income, it does start to be clawed back. And so for a single person in your household, you have one set of government benefits. This is where it gets difficult for a survivor, because in a survivorship scenario, your spouse's old age security, it goes away. Right? There is no survivor benefit. When it comes to survivor CPP, it's a complicated formula. What's really important to note is that your own CPP plus your survivor CPP can never exceed your maximum CPP. So for someone, here's an extreme example, someone in a household where both people are actually entitled to maximum CPP, there is no survivorship benefit. And so for a survivor, this loss of government benefits can actually have a significant change in your retirement lifestyle, given there can be a lot less government income to rely on during your retirement.
Hearing that, you think of these different benefits and like you said, a part of the partner planning, but then that's really something to consider. If something were to happen to either one, all of a sudden those benefits may not be what you had originally planned on them being. So Leslie, how could women actually help maximize the government and pension benefits that they can collect in retirement as they plan to be single?
First of all, I'll start with your work pensions. I encourage you to take advantage of those company matches. Right? A lot of employers offer a program where you contribute and your employer matches what you contribute. With CPP, first of all, make sure that you take advantage of the child rearing provision and have those years that you may have been home with or had a lower income because you are raising small children. Have those removed from your CPP calculation so that you can boost your CPP benefit. But when it comes time to start collecting CPP, call Service Canada and ask questions related to your own personal circumstances. How much would you receive if you retire at a specific age? What will your benefit be? Yes, there can be a bonus for deferring. Understand the downsides of that as well. Old age security, again, each month you defer taking your old age security past the age of 65, your benefit increases. It's a bonus, if you will. Again, it comes down to those personal circumstances. And it's those personal circumstances that will dictate what makes the most sense for you to consider. And I really like to encourage you to consider how and when you start taking income from all of your sources, whether that's government benefits, your pension plans, your investment accounts, not just individually, but in the context of them all together and your overall plan. If you do it tax efficiently, it will greatly impact how much you get to keep. So I'd say consult with a financial professional. And when it comes to tax, speak with your accountant to ensure that you're managing your finances in a tax efficient way.
Yeah, lots to consider there. So certainly, if you're not, an expert in these areas, you absolutely, there are lots of experts out there who study this stuff on a daily basis. So important to kind of pull in those professionals when you need them to make sure that you're on the right track for sure. So the other thing you mentioned is you talked a little bit about kind of taking CPP early or taking it late. So what different considerations might women look at when they're trying to decide whether they should take it either at 65, before, or after?
Some people look at it as from a life expectancy perspective. How long would I need to live in order to maximize the amount that I would receive? Or should I take it now or later decision based on life expectancy? Well, fortunately, that's only one of those things that we're going to know with hindsight. I kind of like to take a bit more of a proactive approach and look at it from a few other angles. One of which being, if you are in a coupled scenario, what does it look like in a survivorship scenario, right? Maybe it makes sense to take those early because there's no real survivor benefit, right? A bird in hand, so to speak. It depends on the timing of when you are going to retire, right? So if you're still working, it may make sense to take advantage of those deferrals, right? Old age security, it is income tested. So if you know in the early years of retirement, you're going to have a larger taxable income for whatever reason, maybe there's an asset sale that's going to have a large capital gain, who knows what it is, it may make sense to actually defer that old age security. So again, I would view those decisions in context of your personal circumstances and with a view of your overall plan, and make sure to get some input from your accountant when that decision is coming down to tax and a tax strategy.
Okay, Leslie, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for sharing your perspective on the importance of financial planning for women. It can be an eye opening experience if you aren't prepared, so it's a great idea to get started as soon as possible. Any final thoughts that you want to share with our audience?
I just encourage you that this truly is a marathon. It's something that happens over a long period of time, and you can do it. So many women have, you can too.
Love it. Some great inspiration to take away. Thanks again for joining us, Leslie. And for those in our audience, make sure to register for our upcoming live webinars and check out our library of on demand content available in the Learning Center and on our YouTube page. See you all next time. All right, Leslie, are you ready for some questions?
I am.
All right. So, our first question is from Amy. And Amy wants to know, can you share some of the biggest mistakes you've seen women make when figuring out how to manage their finances and investing as a single person?
That's a great question. There are a lot of challenges that single women face, right? We all know about things like the wage gap, right? And I have a 14-year-old daughter who loves to talk to me about the pink tax. And being single, not having someone to discuss financial decisions with, and all the expenses are on one person instead of being shared across potentially two incomes. And so there's a lot of challenges that single people face when they are planning financially for themselves. But I want to take a moment to also mention that I see a number of advantages that single women have. First of all, they're already planning to be single. right? So their financial plan, they don't have this potential surprise that hits them at a vulnerable time financially. And they'd already been saving and planning just for themselves. Um, Second of all, what I've seen is they're actually more likely to plan for healthcare costs later on in life and being aware of what that may mean for them, rather than just assuming that a partner is going to take care of them. And finally, they're likely taking steps to financially protect themselves in older age, because again, they realize this is on them. And so putting a lot more effort and care into who those powers of attorney are going to be. And what if you can't manage it on your own? They're already asking those what if questions. And so I find that for single women, financial plans are actually really sound because they're already asking those questions and being aware of the circumstances. But there are some mistakes that some women make. The first one that I run into a surprising number of times is people actually counting on partnering in the future. So, wanting to actually plan financially as if they are in a partnered relationship down the road rather than for being single today. That's a big mistake because financially, we know it's more challenging on your own than in a coupled situation most of the time. Um, and the second big mistake is focusing on short term risk rather than potentially on the long term. And that can result in not investing enough, potentially investing too conservatively. And of course, everyone should always invest according to their own risk tolerance, but basically not taking reasonable risk with enough of their longer term assets can also be a detriment to achieving that lifetime of financial independence.
Okay, so definitely some things to keep in mind. All makes complete sense. And I mean, even talking about the single piece, if you're planning to be partnered, but even if you were partnered, you may again be single in the future. So yeah, it definitely makes sense what you're saying about kind of planning that way, for sure. So great insights on that. Thank you for the question, Amy. Now we have a question from Beatrice. So this question is, in your opinion, how often does it make sense to review a financial and investment plan and potentially make changes? So do you have kind of a solid time frame that you feel it's most important to review those plans?
So, if you remember, Caitlin, we talked about the importance of tracking your progress, right? And part of a smart plan is actually checking in, seeing are you on track or not. And so I would suggest that at least annually that check in needs to happen. So, are you on track to your plan or not? And part of that check in actually goes back to reviewing the assumptions. And it's a good check to see does these assumptions still make sense for me? Or have there been changes in my circumstances? And so we would typically update a financial plan regardless every 3 to 5 years, but annually at least check in to make sure you're on track and review those assumptions. And finally, your life changes, so should your financial plan.
Absolutely. I mean, even when we think of any type of plan, a fitness plan or any type of plan that you have, it's always important to look back in the progress that you've made, right? It just makes you feel better and more encouraged to keep forging ahead, right? uh,
Exactly.
our next question is from Patricia. Patricia is wondering, how should I react if someone underestimates my investing knowledge? So, a financial advisor, a banker, or something like that. So, a very interesting question. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I would say not every advisor is the right fit for every client, and not every client's the right fit for every advisor. And an advisory relationship is a really, really important one. It needs to be someone that you're actually comfortable asking questions to, and of. It needs to be someone who you don't feel any sort of condescension with. If you're in this together for a long time, and usually that's an advisor relationship, you really need to feel that you can work with this person. And it's interesting if you look at it from a widow's perspective. Something like 80% of widows change advisors within 1 year of losing their spouse. And when asked why, most Most of the time, the answer is because the advisor didn't take the time to build a relationship with me. And so that relationship is really key. And so I would say you need to assess, is that person's underestimating your ability? Is it a condescension, or is it a human mistake, right? And we all do make mistakes. So I would view it as a red flag, and then just see how the other dynamics of that relationship are. And is it something that's, a one time, forgivable, or is it something that's symptomatic of a problem in the relationship?
So definitely go on a couple dates with your financial advisor before you financial dates with your financial advisor before you kind of settle on one necessarily. Make sure that there's a spark there, if you will.
Exactly.
All right, that is great. Thank you so much, Patricia. We have another question. This question is from Jay. So Jay is asking, being at 50 years old and single, what advice would you give to somebody who did not work for a few years or unable to save and now playing catch up? So I'm sure that that's something that you hear quite often. Also with limited income, what would you advise as a side gig? So very interesting. I'm sure there's lots of women out there as well who may have had to take years off or go backwards in their career because of raising families or other things that may have come up. So what do you think about that?
So first of all, I would like to say, at least like 50, you still have time, right? And there's a lot of time between now and a typical retirement. So I would encourage you to use that time, and start by planning. Right, earlier in this webinar, there was a walkthrough of the financial tool on, I believe it was Webbroker. That's a great way to at least get a sense of, what is it that you need to do or be able to do to be able to reach an ultimate goal. And so with a side gig, that is one way that people can add to the income. Many times when we're trying to figure out how to save, everyone looks at the expense side, but sometimes you can't really cut expenses anymore. And really, we need to focus on the income side. So how do we boost income? And a side gig can be a great way to do that. I would keep in mind CPP contributions, and make sure with the side gig, wherever possible, if it's a way to boost that benefit, that can be a really attractive way to boost your retirement income, because at least with CPP, it is indexed, meaning it goes up with inflation, and it's guaranteed. So yeah, if there's ways on both sides, one is boosting income to be able to boost potentially your own savings, but second of all, boosting that CPP can also be a big benefit to you.
Okay, good, good, great tips. This is great. Okay, our next question is from Anita. So, how can I learn to handle the emotion of losing money when the stock market drops? I find this one interesting. I always use the stock market as like a roller coaster ride. I always refer to it that way. And just thinking in my personal situation, I love roller coasters, go up and down and backwards and as fast as you can go. And my mom looks at a roller coaster and gets motion sick. So let's talk about that and about how we can feel a bit more comfortable with that volatility.
Absolutely. The number one investor behavior mistake is going to cash in a panic. And it's often at the end of the biggest drop in a roller coaster, that people want off the roller coaster. But when it comes to investing, that's a really tough place to actually crystallize, realize those losses. And how do you recover from it? How do you potentially participate in a market recovery? And so it really comes back to starting with investing for your risk tolerance, asking yourself the question, how would I react if I opened my statement and it was down 10%? What would I do if it was down 20? And investing according to that goal of not going to cash in a panic, and really managing risk that way is going to help you avoid that big mistake.
Yeah, like when we looked at that goal tool, you mentioned it, but like kind of putting those three side by side and really focusing on that negative side, because the positive side, not many people complain when they're making money on their portfolios. It's the other side, right? We're not running for the hills when our portfolios are doing great. It's when they go down that we're worried. So we do really need to be honest with ourselves and figure out what we're comfortable with so that we're not panicking once we see that red number, right?
Exactly.
All right. Our next question is from Sandra. So, Sandra's wondering, what are some of the common habits and traits that you've seen in financially successful women?
That's a great question. Um, so, first of all, I would say they do prioritize their finances. So they do spend with intention and they save with intention. I would say that they invest for the long term. They're aware of the risks of a rainy day and have rainy day funds set aside just in case. And they ask the question, "What if?" Right, and plan accordingly. So they set themselves up for being able to weather those potential storms in life financially.
Okay, excellent. Those are some great tips, I think, to consider. Those are all mostly doable as well, right? Focusing on it and those sorts of things. So I think that's great. Thank you for that, Sandra. We have a question from Reese. This question from Reese is, how do I know if I'm saving and investing enough money?
It really comes down to planning. What is it that you need your financial resources to do for you, right? And how you can know if you're actually doing that or not is really through a financial plan. Does the projections for what you're saving and investing actually result in you being able to accomplish the goal in the time frame that you're looking to accomplish it in? It really does come down to planning. I know when people get started, a lot of it is just save, right? And sometimes that's where rules of thumb do get applied. And the big thing is getting started. But as time goes by and as your vision for your future starts to become a little more clear, actually planning for what that is, and that's going to give you a really good look at, am I doing enough today to have a reasonable chance of achieving that outcome down the road?
Really doesn't sound like we can get around that whole planning thing. Planning seems to be a very key part of this whole process. And following along in that same genre here, we have a question, and this one is from Michelle. So Michelle's asking, how can I find an investing club or an investing advisor for a long time relationship? So yeah, where can we look for an advisor? How can we what are we looking for in an advisor when we're trying to find somebody to help us through this process? What can we actually look for? What are those traits that we're looking for?
So that's a really good question. On the investing club front, I'm not sure that I'm really in a position to be able to answer that side of the question. Usually, that is a group of individuals who know one another already, forming some sort of club. And there's pros and cons to that. But on the advisor relationship side of things, again, fit is really important, right? Do you feel comfortable opening up and sharing with this person? That's a really key piece of information. Do they speak to you in a way that you're comfortable with? Is their tone something that you're comfortable with? Do they Can they buy into your vision for your future? Is there an alignment there? And very importantly, does the advisor have the skills and abilities to do what it is that you are looking for them to do? So, for instance, not all advisors actually provide financial planning, right? If it's a plan you're looking for, but that advisor doesn't do it, okay, that's maybe not the right fit. So, I would have a real conversation around, and what is it that advisor in their practice does? And does that align with what it is that you need from your advisor at this point in time?
Okay. Okay, very good. Lots of stuff to consider. Definitely that fit. Think about that speed dating thing. Okay,
Absolutely.
we have a question here from Jane. So this is interesting. Not sure if this is a place to ask. Could you explain whether annuities are still a viable part of a portfolio? So I will just quickly mention that you can't purchase annuities through TD Direct Investing, but I will let you take it away with the annuities.
Yeah, so I think one of the best words when it comes to portfolio management is portions, right? And when we look at risk in an investment portfolio, diversification is our number one risk management tool. And I actually like to apply that rule to retirement income as well. That portions are really, really important. We have our government benefits. Maybe you have a pension plan, your investment portfolio. Maybe you have rental income from property. Uh, Maybe it's an annuity, right? And it's an important piece to look at and explore. There's pros and cons to annuities. Look at the features, look at for your age, does it make sense or not, and evaluate them. So I would say it's a worthwhile tool to look at, but potentially just for a portion of your overall savings.
And in your book, you talk a little bit about retirement, and I think it's three sources of retirement income that you're looking for. Is that correct? What you just kind of your general golden rule?
Exactly. And it's all because what happens if, maybe you have a rental property? What happens if that tenant's not paying rent? What's the other lever that you have to make up for that shortfall in income? If everything that you have is just government benefits and a defined benefit pension plan, right? Well, what happens when that roof needs to be replaced? What happens when life
Hmm.
throws you a curveball and you don't have something else to draw on? And so that's where I do view diversification as one of the important tools of a retirement income as well when we're looking to prioritize reliability.
Hmm. Okay, excellent. I wanted to pick your brain on that because I know, like, from reading your book, I love that piece. I think that's really important too for our audience to hear, just to understand that a little bit as well. Okay, we have a question from Teresa. So this one's just a little bit more specific. So you talked about life events and reevaluating your plan. So what life events should force me to revisit my financial plan, and what life events should I ignore for revisiting my plan? So what are those kind of key moments, and what ones maybe aren't as important to consider?
Oh, that's a really good one. So anything that takes time, money, or planning really needs to come with an update in your financial plan, right? So if your time horizon has changed for whatever reason, revisit your plan. If something is off financially, right? You have, you're realizing that what you were planning for spending wise in retirement isn't enough, or a life circumstance has happened that means that it's not enough. That needs to revisit a plan. A change in marital status absolutely requires a change in plan. Things that can be ignored, and I wouldn't even say ignored. I think it's a point of discussion that should be had, and it may or may not result in an update of a financial plan. But something like inflation, right? We've just come through a period of time when inflation was running at a really, really low rate, right? And I had many people ask me, well, hang on, we're planning for an inflation rate of, say, 3%, but inflation's at like 1.5%, right? Maybe we should be reducing the inflation, right? And we're saying, well, you know what? The long term historic average in Canada of inflation rate is actually more than 3. So let's not change that at this point in
Yeah.
time. Let's keep that consistent. And so, again, I think there's conversation that needs to be had, and you can then decide, does this mean my plan needs to be updated or not?
right? Like interest rates too, right? We can say, oh, they were low for so long. Let's readjust, and then boom, things change, right? We really need to look at more history when we're planning. We can't just
Right.
look at the short term and say this is the way it's going to be. Okay, very good. I love that. That's a very appropriate, timely piece of knowledge as well. So definitely appreciate that. This is one that I definitely see probably a lot of people getting into when we think about women versus men investing, what our risk tolerances are. So we have a question from Candace saying, my husband has a much higher risk tolerance than I do when investing, and he doesn't want to adjust his portfolio to be more moderate. In your opinion, does it make sense for me to adjust my portfolio to be more risk adverse to compensate for this, or should I just follow my own risk tolerance? What would you suggest? So, is there a balancing act there where you become less risk adverse because your partner's extremely risk happy?
Risk tolerant.
We'll
Yeah.
use the term risk
So
happy. What does that look like?
I'm. I think as I approach this question, what I'm going to do is take the extremes off the table, right? So I'm going to go with, your spouse is more risk tolerant, right? But within a kind of a reasonable framework, right? It's not taking to the extremes of, you know, everything in ultra high risk speculative investments. And so
Yes.
we need to remember that your plan needs to work for both of you and each of you. And that's where a real balancing act needs to be considered. So I would be hesitant to actually change your own risk tolerance over short periods of time. The outcomes might not be that different. But when you fast forward 10, 15, 20 years, the difference in your own savings by maybe not investing to counterbalance what your partner's done, that can lead to a significant outcome difference for you yourself. And so I would say you have the conversation about your personal circumstances, and really do an evaluation of, does it make sense to adjust your own risk tolerance or not? My inclination would be to invest for your own risk tolerance, to avoid the potential of putting yourself at actually a different risk later on in life.
Right. It's not just the risk of volatility. There's also risk of, not growing enough and those sorts of things, right? Interest rate risk and all those sorts of things.
Exactly.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay, the next question we have is from Lana. So Lana's asking an interesting one. You talked a little bit about government benefits. So in your opinion, does it make sense to create an investing plan that ignores government supports like CPP and OAS? I don't want to risk saving too little for retirement. So when would that might be a consideration?
Right. So government benefits are actually a really important piece of Canadians' retirement plans. And for someone who wants to be ultra conservative and really make sure that they have enough in retirement, don't have to worry about anything, then oversaving can make sense. And not counting on government benefits can make sense. However, I think it's important to keep in mind there's a big difference between CPP and old age security, or OAS. CPP, you actually contribute to it. Your employer contributes to it. Those funds are held separately in an actual pension plan, for every Canadian with their name on it, so who's contributed. And so I am more confident in the longevity of Canada Pension Plan. And when we look at the actuarial assessments of Canada Pension Plan, it seems like it's fairly secure for us all. However, when it comes to old age security, that's the one that is paid for out of current government revenues. And we've already gone through a point in history where they tried to change the age of eligibility for old age security, so pushing it out a couple of years. Depending on your age bracket, I would be inclined to plan maybe without old age security, say if you were in your 40s, 30s. But if you're close to retirement or already retired, you're probably okay to count old age security as part of your retirement plan.
Okay, so not great news for our younger audience members, but a little bit of comfort maybe for those who are nearing retirement to not have to worry too much. But we've been talking about this for a lot of years, the viability. So I guess it's not maybe not a huge surprise to hear that. Okay, we have time for one last question. This question is from Grace, and Grace wants to know, do I need a specific goal in order to invest, or can I just get started without a goal?
That's a great question. And I would say getting started is the first step, right? And so, your goal can come later. You're setting yourself up for opportunity if you start to invest sooner. But I would say it's never too early to start planning. At least you know what you're kind of going for. But don't let not having a plan hold you back from getting started on the investment front. I am sure a number of these webinars have gone over the importance of starting early. And when you start early, the outcomes are significantly better than trying to play catch up later on in life. So I would say, don't let not having a plan or not having a goal hold you back from investing, because having investments, it should help you have choice in the future.
Okay, that's great. What a great note to end on. So, thank you so much, everyone in our audience, for attending today. Any last words, Leslie, before we go?
Just thank you so much for having me. And it's a really important topic. And I wish everyone well in their financial journey. It's an exciting one.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you. You've given us some really great information to consider, and I agree it's a very important topic to discuss. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Please take care. We'll see you next time.